we can
Hopefully
see your
folks
screen.
are doing well today. All right. We ready to go ahead and get started?
Yes, we are.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming in today and wanting to hear about Who Moved My Cheese, Navigating Organizational Culture. My name is Laura Randolph, and I'm coming to you all from Rutgers University here in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And so for our time today, my goal is to help you identify the norms and rituals of your organization, to be able to identify the politics that exist in your organization, not limited to interest, conflicts, and power, and then identify ways for you to be effective change agents. And so when we think about organizations today, I really want you to think about your own context. And so an organization could be a true office in which you're working, or it could be a student organization in terms of, or a group project. I really want it to be in a context that's going to make the most sense for you all to think about. And so this first part, I want you to do a little self-reflection. And so as you think about that context for your organization, I want you to think about how would you describe the culture of your team or organization. And so I want you to think, is it a tight-knit team in terms of everyone? Is it cohesive? Or is it factions in terms of small teams within the larger team? Or perhaps it's silos where everyone is kind of on their own. So think about how would you describe the culture of your team. Next, I'd like for you to think about how would you describe your supervisor or your team leader. And so are they someone who is directive in terms of kind of a top-down, this is the way we're going to do things? Are they someone who's more cautious in terms of, we've always done it this way? Or perhaps they're a little bit more collaborative in thinking about how, asking the team, how do we think we should do these things? So thinking about how would you describe your supervisor or team leader. Next, think about your team's values. And so think about the context of your organization. Are they audience-centered? So if you are in a student affairs audience or student affairs office, is your focus on the students that you serve? Or if you're within a student organization and perhaps you're catering to a specific population of students, is that the focus of your team? Is that what your team values? Or perhaps it's really more about the team and the people that you're working with. Or is it more in terms of the self-centered piece, in terms of whether it be about the leader or individuals within your organization? What does your team value? And then the last question I want you to think about is, how does your team or organization respond to conflict? Is it something that is avoid at all costs? Or do you engage in dialogue to address the concerns? Or perhaps it might be kind of a top-down resolution that leaves little room for conversation or discussion. And so hopefully you've had a chance to do a little bit of that reflection. And I probably should have said at the outset, there are no wrong answers. It's really just thinking about the context in which you are working in. And so you might be wondering where this title came from. This is a great text that I highly encourage folks to get by Dr. Spencer Johnson of Who Moved My Cheese. It's a great text about change management. And that's really how I want us to think about how we show up in organizations and spaces. And so this is an amazing book, but I'm going to kind of summarize it in about 45 seconds for you. But there are 4 characters, Hem, Haw, Sniff, and Scurry. And they are mice that are actually in a maze. Within that maze, there's a pile of cheese that they thought would be everlasting until they ate it all and had to figure out what to do next. The character of Hem resisted change and just kind of stayed stuck in their way for the fear of the unknown. Then there was Haw, who was initially stuck, but in time learned to adapt and saw that he could actually find more cheese. Then there was Sniff, who sniffed out the potential changes before others were aware, so definitely scanning that environment and being able to find other sources of food before they actually ran out. And then there was Scurry, and Scurry immediately saw that the cheese was gone and then immediately took action to think about what needed to happen next. And so as you think about how you respond to change and how you show up in organizations, hopefully you can identify with a character, whether you're a him, haw, sniff, or scurry. And again, there's no right or wrong way in which we show up. But this will be the framework in which we use as we talk about how do you navigate change within an organization. And so as we talk about organizational development, I ground my thoughts in the works of Garrett Morgan and images of organization. If you're heading into a higher ed program, it's probably going to be a text that you use often, but I like to use it as we think about political organizations. At the outset, when we think about politics within an organization, it can have a negative connotation. But for me today, I really want us to use it for what it's worth in terms of being able to identify the interests, conflicts, and power that reside in every organization. And so as we think about interests really, in the words of Morgan, talk about it in three different ways. It's thinking about the tasks or the work that needs to be accomplished. It's thinking about, is it more focused on a kind of career aspirations and thinking long term? Or perhaps it's focusing in on that individual, whether it be around their beliefs, their personalities. And so really thinking about interests in those different ways. When we think about conflict within a political organization, conflict is when those interests collide. And so if you have someone who is very much about the work being done, but then someone else is more so about themselves, that is where the conflict will ultimately erupt. And from that, power emerges emerges when the conflict is resolved and how the conflict is resolved. So who is coming forth and resolving that conflict? And so as we think about talking about how politics exist in an organization and how change happens, Morgan takes it a step further and says within the political organizations, there are actually three types of organizations that can exist. The first one being unitary, or affectionately called the arena. And when we think about an arena, it's really about a collective approach to the work. And so interests show up as common goals. There's a cohesion to the interests of the team. And conflict is seen as rare because there is a commonality and there's a cohesion to the group that if there is conflict, it's seen as deviant behavior or troublemakers. And so therefore, because conflict is perceived as quote unquote rare, power is rarely used and it's largely ignored. And so as we think about the him, haw, sniff, and scurry characters, it's thinking about if this is the organization in which you have the opportunity to work within, and you possess these characters, how can you respond to change? And so if you're him, you might have an inability to adjust, which means as the group shifts and change based on the group dynamics and that cohesion, you might be viewed as deviant. And so thinking how you may need to adjust with that. If you're haw, over time, you may realize that you need to change your strategy. And so recognizing over time what you're doing may need to shift and adjust as the team shifts and adjusts. If you're someone who is sniff, you're already scanning your environment. You're already seeking out, okay, we're a cohesive group. How can I develop common alliances with folks to ensure that we are still all working towards a common goal? And so you're really keeping your eyes wide open, always looking for opportunities for alliances within the team. Or perhaps you are a scurry. And a scurry, you're kind of an immediate and go-go action. You already know there's cohesion amongst the team, and so you're banking on that. And so you're always ready to develop new opportunities and to develop win-win opportunities for everyone. And so as we think about the unitary organization, those are some of the personalities of how you might operate, but also how you might need to adjust and shift within that organization. The next type of organization that Morgan talks about is that of a pluralist organization, or perhaps we like to use the metaphor of a carnival. In a carnival, there's a lot of different things happening. So there may be a frenzied approach, but if you're familiar with chaos theory, it may seem frenzied on the outside, but underneath there is inherent order. Or in this case, there's a synergy that is happening amongst the team. And so there is a diversity of interests and ideas because there's a diversity of individuals, but it's welcomed. In conflict, they understand in this type of organization, conflict is inevitable because there is such a diversity of ideas. But conflict is not seen as a negative thing. Actually, it's seen as an energizer, as a way to bring forth new ideas of the team and ensuring that you can be your best self. And the way those conflicts are resolved in terms of power, it comes from a variety of different areas. Because it is seen as an energizer, the resolution can come from anyone within the organization. So if you subscribe to being a him character, what does that look like in this type of organization? Well, for one, as a him, this actually works out really well for you because you might be one who might be slow to change, but that's okay. Because if the team goes left and you go right, it's okay because the team appreciates both the left and the right. If you are a Hall character, you might see the team going left and you might start to want to go that way but feel like you need to go the other way and feel like you need to seek out alliances, but then you soon recognize that you can go left or right and still be appreciated and part of the team. If you are someone who identifies as the sniff character, you see that we're going left and right, and you want to make sure that the team is able to recognize that. And so you're one who is, again, scanning that environment and being able to address those concerns and bring those concerns to the group so that you can still be able to move in a forward progression. If you are our scurry characters, you immediately see that there's a left group and a right group, but not only do you just state that, but you also help create a plan of action to make sure that we can all still move forward. Again, there's no right or wrong way in which to show up in an organization, but it's just, again, giving you some different points of view as you think about creating change and being a part of, or rather being a change agent. What are some of those effective strategies? And then the last type of organization is that of the radical organization, or as some folks like to call the battleground. And sometimes in the battleground, we're seen as opposing forces. And so your interests, they're often contradictory. So unlike the previous organization types where differing interests were appreciated and cohesive, in a radical organization, it really is more so it's contradictory and it's competing. And oftentimes, the competing happens between those that might be in management and those that might be on the front line. And so in this type of environment, conflict, yes, is inevitable. But unfortunately, a lot of times in these types of environments, conflict is not just because we chose to go right as the front lines and that management chose to go left. Typically, there are issues that run a lot deeper. And so trying to resolve that conflict shows up in different ways and can be a lot more challenging. Oftentimes in a radical environment, the way conflict is resolved actually reflects some of kind of the global environment, and often that it becomes a top-down decision, and it continues to stir and to brew more issues and more conflict and more concerns. And so if you are a him character in this environment, you still want to do what you've always done. But sometimes you may take on the piece of not caring because you feel like the team doesn't value your thoughts anyway. And so it's trying to figure out how you resolve those pieces. If you are a Hall character, you're seeking out information, but you recognize that it might be futile. Because you're starting to see your colleagues around him who are trying to do what they've always done, not caring and feeling like the team is not supporting them. But you want to adapt as a Hall character. And so sometimes it means adapting means finding your own solution and own resolution. If you are a sniff character, you see the issues ahead, again, because you as a sniff are scanning your environment. And so you see those issues ahead, but you want to create your own path to resolution. And you want to help the team be able to be a part of that. As a scurry, again, you are one who wants immediate reaction, but sometimes your immediate reaction can lead to rash decision-making. And so as a scurry, it is being mindful of some of those rash decision-making pieces, how that can impact the team. And so as we think about what a political organization looks like, or really an organization that has politics within it, which I think all of our organizations do, it's thinking about how interests, conflict, and power show up in that organization. And sometimes that is something that we cannot necessarily control. But what we can control is how we show up. And so looking at the characters of him, Hall, sniff, and scurry, it's looking to see what's going to be the best approach within that respective organization to be able to create change and see what can be most effective. And so I recognize this was a very quick overview in terms of how to be an effective change agent. It really is looking to see as a him person who in terms of likes to do what they've always done, as a Hall character in terms of someone who may initially want to do what they've always done, but are then slow to adapt. To someone who actually scans the entire environment and is always in tune to what is happening to be able to make decisions. To those that are kind of the immediate, I see an issue and I want to resolve it. There is space for all of those types of personalities and individuals in an organization. It's just thinking about within those organizations, how can you achieve the best results? And so I thank you for being able to tune in and listen through that presentation. But I wanted to see if there are questions.
Fantastic, Lauren. Thank you so much for that presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to either share them in the chat or you can put them through by unmuting yourself and asking them directly. Lauren, you've given me a lot to think about of who I am and what aspect I play of hem, haw, sniffer, scurry whenever I'm in a team meeting now. I think what have you seen in your work as people learn this? Does it shift their mindset of thinking through what role they play and definitely in what arena or battleground or carnival they're in?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think if anything, it creates awareness of kind of if they're frustrated, or oftentimes for myself, it can be frustrating to recognize like, why are people either not hearing ideas or why do we feel like we're going in different directions? It is taking time to kind of pause to see A, what is the context of the environment? And then B, how am I showing up? Am I showing up in a way that may come across as scurry and folks don't feel like I'm taking in the environment and taking time to understand the bigger picture? And so sometimes it really is just taking time to kind of pause and reflect on how I as an individual is showing up, because we all show up very differently. And sometimes not knowing that we are coming across as either that scurry that has immediate reactions and it may be fueled by just energy and excitement. Sometimes it does take a time to slow down and be that him and to be that Hall, to understand the environment, but also to be able to better communicate to your colleagues and to your team what your ideas are to help create that buy-in.
That's very helpful. I think the piece that was also helpful for me is understanding that not one of them is necessarily a bad person to be, especially depending on the environment that you're in. So I think that is really great to have an understanding of the impact that can have. That just because you might be hem in different environments, it's actually a positive thing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic, Laura. Well, thank you so much. If you want to put up the screen with your contact information again,
Sure.
I think that would be helpful. And it looks like we have a question on here. How do you let everyone know that there is enough cheese and not to tear each other down?
It's a great question. I think being vulnerable and saying that, and learning how to say that in many different ways. Because I think it is still taking that mindset of those characters, because you may want to be able to say, hey, there's plenty of opportunities for all of us, but someone may interpret that as being scurry, that you're just wanting to move on to the next thing. But sometimes it is being able to think about those alliances and see where they're coming from and why do they feel like either resources are being diminished or ideas are not being appreciated or are accepted, to help them understand your perspective, but also to help understand their perspective. And perhaps together, you can be able to present kind of a new way forward, that where both folks are appreciated and understood and welcomed.
Great. Well, thank you for that insight. And thank you again so much for joining us for this presentation. We're grateful to have you for it. We are going to take a quick 10-minute break now, and then we invite you to join us again for working remotely with the Rev team presented by NASFA. So we'll see you all again at 3:50 p.m. Eastern. This room will stay open. You can stay logged in, and we'll be back in 10 minutes.